Hello, in this video I'm going to be going over the week 2 assignments and schedule to give you a sense of what's coming up here in week 2. So the topic is historical sites and preservation. So historical sites, those would be places where historical events happen. So for example, the 96 National Park is where a battle happened, the Battle of 96. And how do we preserve those sites? How do we keep them going? How do we keep them together while also allowing people to come to them? So as with the first week, you've got readings and you've got videos. The readings here are, there's like 4 articles, so it's a little bit more than we might have in other weeks. That's because we don't have any major projects due this week. When there's more projects, there's less readings and vice versa. So you complete the readings, you complete the videos, and then you complete the following assignments and quizzes by Sunday, 11:59 p.m. So there's a response paper usual. There's a discussion board post. There's the web scavenger hunt quiz and the Blackboard quiz. Nothing too different here. The one thing that's a little bit different is you have a museum project report due. So let's have a look at that museum project report. So basically, you've got this big museum assignment, and a lot of the stuff you're going to be doing is connected to that assignment. So later on, you make a podcast, you make a documentary. Those things have to be connected to the museum project. That's kind of the idea. So it's really easy to look at a very short assignment like this and just say, okay, great, I can knock this down in like 5 minutes. And I would encourage you not to take that view, because if you do later on, you're going to find that your assignment is going to not be that good, and it's going to just cause you a lot of stress and a lot of time. If you do your work well here, that makes things a lot easier. So if you settle on your theme, time period, and place, you got a really clear idea of what that is, things will be a lot easier for you. If you know kind of what your big idea is, things get a lot easier. Doing your research, make sure those secondary sources really matter. Make sure the primary source matters, right? If you don't know what time period you're looking at, you can't find good secondary primary sources. And if you don't have good sources, you're not going to have an informative museum. So you just want to be careful of that. So let's have a little bit closer look at the response paper. So the response paper, we've got these 4 articles: interpreters and museum educators. We've got historical preservationists and cultural resource managers. We've got historical houses and buildings. And we have in local historical agencies. So you're looking, this is a section that really focuses on place, places where important things happened, historical things happened. And what's also key about it is each one of these articles is written by an expert, by someone who works in those particular areas. So that's why I've assigned multiple articles, because each one's talking about a different kind of job that you yourself may be interested in. And I want you to get that kind of exposure to see, what's kind of out there and how you get there. And that's why I really like those articles. They're a little bit older than I would like, but there's nothing really else like this that really gives you that nice introduction. So I think there's a great place to start. So we've got this thing called a conservogram. I want to include this. Conservograms are things put out by the National Park Service that gives basically like instructions on how to deal with some technical issue, like how do I preserve this cannon that's falling apart, something like that. And it's the kind of thing you're either going to read and say, this is really boring, I don't want to have anything to do with this, or you may read and say, this is awesome, this is hands-on history, I love it, I want to do this. And that's why I assigned that. There's this really cool thing called Popup Museums, which are basically kind of temporary museums. And I just want to show you some examples of what's possible with that, because, you may get a job outside the history field, but you may want to do stuff with history. And that's kind of a great way to do it. We had these next couple few videos are kind of focusing on local history in South and North Carolina, just looking at, and including Greenwood, because we've got the Mays Museum Interpretive opening and the Dixie Drive-In, just to give you a sense of those kind of local possibilities that exist. The next 2 are interviews that I did at 96. First with Ranger Adrian Stewart, who's basically in charge of managing 96. And she talks about her job and how she got it and what she likes about it. So again, and she gives really good practical advice. And that's why I like that interview. And Ranger Stewart's also a lot of fun. She actually taught me how to use a swivel cannon, which is basically a small cannon, or what's called a swivel gun, a small cannon. I managed to do that without hurting myself or anyone else. So I'm quite proud. And then what's really cool is Ranger Stewart helped hire Sydney Shepard, who's now a ranger at 96. And she is a former Lander student. She's an alumni. And it was wonderful to get the chance to interview her. I actually did the first interview with the podcast with her as well. And so she has a history at Lander that's quite good. Next, we have a video about the that is actually shown at 96. And part of that is to just give you a sense of how do you very quickly interact with your museum visitors, and how do you get them to efficiently understand what's going on there. And by efficiently, I mean in a short amount of time, right? How do you tell complex history? I mean, people have written books about 96. How do you get that into like a 25-minute video? I also wanted people to think a little bit about Colonial Williamsburg, and they had this wonderful orientation video that's meant to guide guests who are coming to their historic site. The Tavern Debate Radicalism is trying to show how living history, how reenactors, museum interpreters, whatever you want to call them, how they can help us to better understand history. Then the one thing that you have to learn to deal with in public history especially is dealing with controversial issues when you're not necessarily like, people aren't going to necessarily accept you as the expert. So, when I teach history in a classroom, people are generally like, yeah, he's a professor, he knows what he's doing. I've tricked them all, you see. But generally, no one's going to question what I say about history. It just generally doesn't happen. That's not going to necessarily happen in public history. You will have people challenge you. You'll have people coming with different understandings of these things that may be problematic. And you got to think how to deal with that. And one particularly controversial, difficult issue to deal with is slavery. So one video you'll look at is Follow the North Star, which is looking at how some Indiana museums deal with this, and interpreters. Ask a Slave is interesting because the woman who does that video series, she worked at George Washington's old house as reenacting a slave, and she talks about some of the crazy questions that people ask her and how she had to deal with them. And you can see she's even now a little bit frustrated. But I really like her because she uses humor to help us understand something that's, really terrible. So, if you look at the Blackboard site, there's a response paper, there's a museum project. Generally, I have stuff up in the order that you would do them. So actually you open the response paper first, right? You do all this stuff, then you take the quiz. So that's kind of the idea there. Remember, there are 2 quizzes. There is the Blackboard quiz, which is based on the response paper, which is based on all the videos and readings. And then there's the Web Scavenger Hunt 2 quiz, which is based on the scavenger hunt. And you can see here are all the links for that. So that's all I have to kind of introduce you to what's going on this week. I hope that is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you later.